So when Q or Ralph Smart or Tim Ray or Lance Wallnau or Kanye or whoever are telling people everything is a lie, question everything, what they're doing is giving people the more practical version of Alice Bailey's teaching that everything is an illusion and you need to wake up and transcend that illusion. Whether it's described as the Matrix or the illusion or Jezebel's witchcraft or the worldwide web of lies, whatever it may be. You wake up to the illusion of the Matrix by waking up to the lies. Okay? Everything's a lie, everything's an illusion. Everything is a lie is how the Gnostic concept that reality is an illusion is expressed in modern conspiracy discourse, which is increasingly going more and more mainstream. And another way this is expressed is through this idea of programming, that the elites, the New World Order, the Matrix, etc., programs mankind. Okay, Tim Ray referred to this idea before when he called the organized lie a worldwide organized program. And also Ralph Smart talks about the Matrix agenda as a program and how this programming of the Matrix is just an illusion in your mind.
Just thrown on not only the American people, but people around the world. This is a worldwide organized program. The organized lie is very powerful. This is a worldwide organized program.
I know how the education system works firsthand, and it is a massive program. How can you fight an illusion? How can you fight something which is not real out there? It only exists as a program in your mind. You can choose to stay in the Matrix and be programmed by mainstream media, or you can choose to free your mind in New Earth.
So breaking free of the program is another way of saying breaking free of the Matrix or the illusion or the black magic witchcraft. And Ralph Smart saying that the illusion is not really out there, that it's just a program in your mind, is similar to how Alice Bailey described it as well. She said in Glamour, a World Problem regarding illusion, the world of phenomena is not denied, but we regard the mind as misinterpreting it and refusing to see it as it is in reality. We consider this misinterpretation as constituting the great illusion. So the illusion at root is more importantly seen as a misinterpretation of reality in our mind. And the conspiracy community would say that the root cause of this misinterpretation comes via the programming by those in power, right? The worldwide organized program, to quote Tim Ray. This programming terminology is part of the matrix simulation artificial intelligence language that the false light uses when talking about the New World Order. You program a computer, right? And that's the idea behind New Agers and Truthers calling the matrix agendas programs or programming. It's the idea that the powers that be are trying to turn us into computers or machines by downloading their programs into our mind. It's another way of describing the lies and illusions of the Matrix. Any kind of language that points to machines or computers when referring to the Antichrist agenda is a false light trait. Okay, Matrix, simulation, artificial intelligence, programming, robots, technocracy, machine, etc. Okay, remember Good Fight Ministries referring to Hollywood as a machine in their documentary Hollywood Unmasked. This is how the false light speaks of the dark side, because the dark side is this materialistic, atheistic, very anti-Christian, anti-spiritual, tyrannical machine that wants to completely rip out any vestige of God in society and turn people into their mindless, robotic slaves. And that's the idea behind the title of David Icke's book, The Robots' Rebellion. And see, a computer or machine isn't responsible for simply acting the way that it's been programmed, right? So if humans are being lied to and programmed by the Matrix and its architects, then again, we're the victims. If you believe that you're being programmed, then you don't really believe any of it is your fault. Okay, this is one of the biggest tells of this deception, making you feel like a victim. Like you're the one being programmed and manipulated and lied to and wronged, and making you focus on the lies that have been told to you by Satan and the so-called powers that be, instead of trying to get you to grieve over your own sin and focus on the lies that you've been telling yourself. Now, for the remainder of this video, we're going to look at one of the best examples of this deception, who I haven't talked about before, but I think it's high time. A conspiracy YouTuber named Probably Alexandra. Her entire channel is rooted in the Wake Up to the Matrix narrative. The very same narrative pushed by New Agers like Ralph Smart, Tim Ray, David Icke, and even Q, even though she claims to expose the QAnon deception. For example, she has a video called 5 Phases of Deprogramming. So right away, there's that programming lingo that we already talked about as being part of the false light matrix narrative. And here's what she says in the description. She says, I share my opinion on the 5 phases of broad-scale deprogramming from the Luciferian matrix. It contains all the typical Gnostic truther hallmarks like waking up, escaping the matrix, going down the rabbit hole, programming and deprogramming, learning about the lies of the elites in the media, recognizing the signs and symbols of the Freemasons, taking the red pill, learning about the Luciferian families or bloodlines, and most importantly of all, exposing Mystery Babylon. Remember, that's the ultimate target of the beast, Mystery Babylon. And it's what the false light focuses on. It's always about Babylon. That's one of the biggest tells of the false light deception. Just like the Seven Mountain Mandate Dominionists who talk about invading Babylon, right? And this is what I mean about the Christian right and the Gnostic truther community being in lockstep in a militant march against Mystery Babylon.
The first step to deprogramming is admitting that you've been programmed. Deprogramming simply means to question everything that you've been taught. This type of programming happens at school, on TV, in movies, at work, and within family structures. It's a never-ending process that's been put in place primarily by the media and the educational system. There are many pillars of programming. The Matrix has pillars like religious, governmental, history and science, and the personal one. It's paramount to unplug from all of them. It definitely doesn't happen overnight, so be patient with yourself and with anyone else trying to wake up. Is to come out of the lies, to spiritually come out of Mystery Babylon. Alright, so I have an outline for you guys to look at that details the first-person process of deprogramming and unplugging from the religious pillar of the Matrix.
Okay, so deprogramming, unplugging from the Matrix, coming out of Mystery Babylon, come out of Mystery Babylon and come into the new earth, okay, which will ultimately be the kingdom of the beast. And this is one of the connections with the Christian truther and dominionist movements, which are likewise exposing and rising up against Babylon and trying to usher in the new earth, okay, which we'll get into more later on. And also, part 5 of her programmed series is called Chainless Slaves, which is very reminiscent of what Morpheus says to Neo in the Matrix, that he's a slave in the Matrix. Alexandra is another Morpheus, another Gnostic deceiver, just like Alex Jones or David Icke or Russell Brand, trying to get you to wake up, trying to wake up prospective Neos to the fact that they're slaves in the Matrix. This is a program on Gaia, a popular New Age streaming service, called Breaking Free of the Matrix. First, I'll play a clip from Breaking Free of the Matrix on the left side, and then play the corresponding clip from Alexandra's video on the right, and go back and forth with that for a few minutes to show how they parrot the same narratives and how they use the same talking points and buzzwords. Pay attention to how they both talk about the Matrix, talk about being lied to by the elites and the media and the education system, how everything is fake or not what we thought, once again, an illusion, and how they both refer to this idea of being programmed.
By the end of the 1950s, the CIA had created a plethora of programs that were designed to change the way humans think and behave.
This is where you begin your journey into the endless rabbit trails of information, and the world starts to look like your worst nightmare.
Eventually, these programs would also target the media, education, and even Hollywood.
This type of programming happens at school, on TV, in movies, at work, and within family structures.
The programs were developed to fool the human race through the use of planted stories and fake news.
We've learned our history is wrong. Our heroes are murderers. Our celebrities are satanic ritual abuse victims, and a small group of families and organizations call the shots.
You come into the world, immediately your parents who've been through this programming system start to download that perception to you. You then go out at the end of this, having got into enormous debt at the end of it to pay for your own programming at college and university. And you all take with you that core programming of reality, what I call the postage stamp. We are being programmed day after day after day.
The first step to deprogramming is admitting that you've been programmed. There are many pillars of programming. This type of programming happens at school, on TV, in movies, at work, and within family structures.
Immediately, your parents who've been through this programming system to pay for your own programming at college and university. That core programming of reality, we are being programmed day after day after day.
You've been programmed. There are many pillars of programming.
So you're a slave. You were born into a prison that you cannot perceive, a prison for your mind. This is the very essence of Neo's Gnostic awakening, to learn that he was a slave in a massive prison. As Nick Good said earlier, people are awakening to the fact that they are victims of a control system. This is what the false awakening is. Waking up to the prison, realizing that you're a slave, seeing yourself as a victim. Again, the victim mentality. In fact, Truth Unedited defines his awakening in this exact way. Listen.
One thing I have tried to show him is how mind-controlled he has been. Because for me personally, when I started to wake up, this understanding of the mind control meant a great deal for me. I went back to much of the programming that I was under, and I was able to see where certain thoughts and behaviors they came from. I had to do something that was very hard for me to do at that time, and that was humble myself and recognize that I was a follower and I was hustled and taken advantage of for a very long time. My mind was not my own. My thoughts were not my own. I was a victim to severe mind control.
So he says realizing that he was a victim of mind control was a pivotal part of his awakening. Nothing about his own sin, though, right? He woke up to someone else's sin. Again, with the Gnostic awakening, it's always about what others have done to them, about the bad things that other people have done. The mind control programming, as he says here. Another example of how programming is a buzzword of the conspiracy movement, which we talked about last time. Another example is a conspiracy theorist named Alan Watt, who passed away in 2021. He had a radio program called Cutting Through the Matrix. Here's his website. And at the top, he has an interesting quote that says, "The process of awakening has begun. The discovery is underway," which sounds like something from a Q drop or something. And some synonyms for discovery would be revelation, disclosure, and unveiling. So he's basically saying the unveiling is underway, continuing that motif of lifting the veil. And interestingly, this quote is from something called A Course in Deprogramming, just like probably Alexandra's video, 5 Phases of Deprogramming. As I mentioned last time, this is another major theme or watchword of the false light conspiracy movement. We've been programmed by the elites and the Matrix, and we need to be deprogrammed in order to be awakened and escape the Matrix. Deprogramming is another way of describing the Gnostic awakening. Next, this is a show on Gaia TV called Psychedelica. This particular episode is called Breaking the Ancient Matrix.
As a biologist, I kind of see the reference of the Gnostic Gospels to the archons as kind of like a virus on this planet or in the cosmos. And the way that viruses work is they inject their programming or DNA into the host, which could be a human or an organism. And by a sneaky mechanism, they get the host to replicate more of the virus.
So once again, the Archons being identified as the creators of the Matrix. The narrator said mankind is locked in material reality, disconnected from its spiritual heritage by the Archons, and makes an explicit reference to the Gnostic texts. And you also heard that woman use the conspiracy watchword of the programming of the Matrix. that the archons have programmed our mind in such a way that we remain attached to the material world, constantly pulled down by the distractions of media and technology, and unaware of our divine natures. And then real quickly, here's another New Age blog called The Portal, Intelligence Hub for the Victory of Light. This is an entry from 2012 called Fall of the Archons. On the physical plane, the control is maintained through Orion Babylonian-type debt-based financial system slavery and through mass media mind programming. In 5 Phases of Deprogramming, she seems to speak of the Matrix in a more metaphorical sense, which is problematic enough. But in An Inconvenient History, she goes beyond mere metaphor and presents the Matrix as a literal reality that the satanic elites and their demonic gods have artificially constructed through the use of technology, and here's the kicker, frequency, exactly as the New Age does. Listen to this clip from An Inconvenient History.
The Cabal wants you to believe in some AI or alien takeover. But the reality is we live in an artificial matrix that is transmitted into the lower atmosphere by the royal and noble bloodlines, priests, rabbis, imams, and different occultists, including but not limited to brother men and Jesuits, who are mathematical and geometric programmers of society. We live in an artificial matrix.
It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes
to keep you from the truth.
What truth?
Worldwide, there are people whose free will has been taken away by Luciferian programmers.
That you are a slave, Neo.
It has become increasingly difficult to free ourselves from the order, as it is constantly trying to mold us into the slaves it wants.
A prison for your mind.
Because it's all about control and accepting control. That's fundamentally part of the programming. And that's why they've set up this system of perceptual programming underpinned in the earliest period of someone's life by the education system.
What we call a human life is just a programming download from cradle to grave. All around you are other people that have been through the same program who are confirming to you that what you've downloaded is true. You've got the media 24/7 telling you the program is real. It's all a program. And we have the ability to take power over that program back anytime we choose. And what happens when people so-called wake up, which means wake up from the program or start to? They start to notice the incredible synchronicity in their life that suddenly starts. Then waking up is not finding something. It's not even seeking something. It's removing the perceptual onion skins of programming to allow the true self in.
And what's scary is they know our subconscious is more powerful than our conscious hundreds of times. So they bombard us with sick, demoralizing images and messages, both unconsciously and consciously, both overtly and subliminally, to break our will at a subconscious level and make us think we're absolutely outnumbered and totally defeated, so that when someone who is conscious warns you, the magician has already programmed you to the point that you have automatic defenses to see nothing, to hear nothing, to say nothing, to feel nothing. And then you are a true slave. Don't let the establishment media emotionally program you to follow their paradigms.
You've just got to try to wake folks up and move on and not even worry about so much the pre-programming you get back. That's just because they're victimized. They've been programmed. Don't let that get to you. Don't receive that information. Give them your info like they're a patient and move on to the next person.
And it is brain damaging the public, where you've got a bunch of spectators who cannot take action, who cannot get involved, who cannot respond, who are not living their own lives, but are being programmed by limited social engineering messages that are coming through the mainstream media and that also still dominate the internet.
We're going to set up a world government. We're going to slowly titrate the dose and poison the public, dumb them down, put electromagnetic radiation out with 5G that scrambles their DNA, lowers their IQ. We're going to cause mass mental illness and a controlled societal collapse that'll then be organized and controlled in the mop-up crew by robots, controlled by the globalist programmers.
It's the programming that keeps us in a lower density, which makes it very difficult to process this stuff. And that's why there's programmings. The technologies they use further challenge us, though, and so attacks are a constant, and the programmings are in everything. Media, government, entertainment industry, and all institutions of power. But once we break the programming and realize, wait a second, what is this box? Who are these people? And we step away, we're not as affected by these assaults. And we have to realize we're very advanced. Spirit, our connection to spirit, has a powerful ability to handle all this. And people are breaking the programming by allowing their consciousness to expand beyond these things. So instead of plugging into the programming, they can see these people are thriving, they're unifying, they're coming together. It's not so lonely. I have so many clients who are breaking through programming, who are ready to, who have that moment or revelation of something's not right here, and they're crying out. And that's that moment you grab their hand and say, okay, I'm here. And this is what we have to do as we unify, is to assist those souls.
Built into the system, so to speak, is the ability for angels to disagree with the program. Mm-hmm. And it's a pretty minor possibility, but it's there for a good reason, because they have to choose to do what they do. They're not robots.
Right.
So the transhumanists want to create robots that are programmed, but angels are not robots, so they have freedom.
But then there's also going back into time and taking a look at things like the educational system. Mm-hmm. That is a perfect, if you wanted to look at a perfect prerequisite to the transhuman agenda. Yep. Because what is the educational system? It's not Plato's idea of education, meaning drawing forth our inner brilliance and our inner intelligence. It's programming. It should be rightly called programming.
Everybody's on their own little devices, right? Being programmed minute by minute. It's growing itself as an artificial network based on repetitive patterns, to the extent where now it's programming us instead of the other way around. It is terrifying. And they're doing this to people, certainly in this community, but all over. As you say, this can even start going in test groups mainstream, where you're programming this information directly into people's brains, these images.
Yeah.
It's awful.
I mean, their goal is to turn us into smart things.
Right.
And by smart, I don't mean more intelligent or having a higher IQ, but rather a two-way communication system. Programmable, watchable, just like your toaster or your microwave oven or your refrigerator. And suddenly it acts like it activates your neocortex. It syncs you up with a computer somewhere, makes you watchable, programmable, and in every way an automaton. In fact, that's Google's promise, that if you will take their smart dust and get with the synthetic neural cortex program, you will have the brain capacity not of one human, but of 7 billion humans. To me, this is sort of like Satan taking Jesus up to the top of the tower and saying, this can all be yours. But what's the cost going to be? The cost will be your free will. The cost will be ultimately, potentially, your soul.
In the ancient days, Satan was considered the civilizational rules and social programming of whatever the day was. And if you were going to become enlightened, you had to confront the great Satan, which was all of your programming and all of the teachings, your religion, your education, your business rules, and you had to find your true self in the face of all of that, and kind of deprogram an open consciousness, and do so without an agenda of having control over others. So that's the original Satan.
People on the surface of the planet have been programmed to believe that being soft and caring for other sentient beings is a weakness. This programming has originated from the Archons, then distributed through Jesuit and Illuminati networks, and then through the mainstream media to the surface population. Vertical implant programming is the basis for quarantine Earth blockage. The second layer of programming is horizontal implant programming. The Pleiadians have asked me to address this now in order to start deconstructing the society programming that creates the matrix.
Then you have what's called a personal subjective universe. That is where a person's subconscious mind is programmed in a way that affects their conscious mind, and they perceive reality not as it is, but as they are, as they think it is, right? Based on things like neurolinguistic programming, dogma, indoctrination, etc.
People Magazine or Us Weekly or even, the New York Times, the sophistication now of the neurolinguistic programming, even on Hannity and these TV shows that are supposedly alternative, the sophistication of the neurolinguistic programming involved in that is people are not aware of that either. It's actually safer to go get ice cream than it is to watch these programs. Because you're being affected on a subliminal level that you don't even know. You are that unaware of how deeply affected you are by it. And all you have to do is shut your TV off for a month and monitor how you feel. And that alone is proof enough. I mean, a place to start is to reject convenience programs, such as fast foods, eating in front of the TV. Public schools, I think, are just wretched. Network news, and recognize the programs for what they are, which is mind control.
And that's been the big lie. Americans have been duped, deceived, and programmed to think that the government controls them. This goes way back. This is not new.
That Mr. Jordan Maxwell and I have quite a bit in common. And they prompted me, pushed me, you might say, to meet with this gentleman. And I guess that you had the same treatment on your end, didn't you, Jordan?
I certainly did, yes. When you understand that the old priest, the magicians, worked their magic on people with their magic wands, and their magic wands were always made out of Hollywood. And they're still working their magic today with Hollywood. If you understand how we are being manipulated, we're being programmed, Hollywood is nothing more than an instrument in the hands of the secret societies. And in Los Angeles, anyone who knows anything about the motion picture industry knows that the real bosses are in New York and back east. Nobody makes any decisions here in Los Angeles. Those decisions are made by some very powerful people behind the scenes in New York and upstate New York.
And we're not talking about just Hollywood. We're talking about the media overall, in general, including print, television, radio.
Right.
Again, if you are just staring at your phone all the time and you are, obsessively like trying to finish work so you could go watch TV and be programmed, again, that's already something that's happening. Or if you're never even attempting to investigate your true potential, then you're already in that system. You're already programmed. You're already part of that, cybernetic technocracy. So that's one of the things that's sad to me is, yes, they're building it up to another layer where it's more dangerous, and that is the absolute end sacrifice of humanity, because then us as humans are no longer useful on the food chain at all. We'll go extinct overnight over that or something like that. But it's that it's already happening to an extent today with just the way people have programmed themselves or been indoctrinated and allowed themselves to be programmed.
And that's because the vast majority of people have been programmed to operate primarily within their left brain. There's a lot of research has shown that because of all the programming that takes place, for a lot of the male population, it's only when they get to about the age of 35 that they actually start to move away from the focus on the self. But up until that point, and it's no fault of their own because it's part of the programming, they focus very much on the self. The programming of the self, the ego, is very sophisticated because it plays very much on our fears. It wants to create this division between us and everybody else.
But now that the solar flash is nearing, everybody's consciousness is ascending really fast. And that's why you see the Trump movement. Everybody is awakening and they're realizing that there's an Illuminati and they're realizing that there's extraterrestrials everywhere. And this is all caused by the solar flash that's about to occur. It's creating a leap of evolution of consciousness for everybody. So the mind programming technology that Saturn is emitting is not going to work on us for that much longer. It's, if you watch CNN, all the graphic design that they use and typography, it's just all designed to streamline into your brain really easily. And it's all designed to create fear. Even the fonts that they use on CNN are just designed to create fear and control, mind programming.
And we're getting into the realms of what is known as predictive programming. This predictive programming, it doesn't matter whether the event in question happened the way we were told it did, because many of these events are false flag hoaxes, or they're staged using actors. And another reason why predictive programming and all these symbols is done is because what's actually happening is a magic ritual which is taking place. One of them is known as monarch programming, and this is one that we see at work in the entertainment business over and over again. And it creates these different compartments or altars of the mind that can each be programmed with a different personality. Many of the artists involved just happen to come out of the deeply satanic Disney Corporation. And what you hear is that a lot of this programming actually goes on Disney premises.
This is predictive programming, I would say. And you have to watch it really close. Maybe you might even have to freeze your Blu-ray or DVD to see that the date is 2001, right? 9/11/2001. So maybe a quick excursus on what predictive programming is. I believe that it's this notion of conditioning people to what's going to come, right? So that maybe the subconscious sees these images and records it. And then when it actually happens in the real world, we're a lot more willing to accept it. We've been conditioned.
That, to me, that passport calendar date is actually one of the most astonishing predictive programming ever in film history. And it's really all of our journey to try to break free of this matrix, all the way from what you've been taught in school to what your parents and your religions were trying to teach you. You've been trapped in a matrix your whole entire life. Even when you think you're liberated from the matrix, you're still living out the programming that the matrix left embedded in you. And we live in a matrix, and we need to all break free of the matrix.
Sacred psychoactive plants can serve humanity at this time, as they always have, to see beyond the program of the matrix of the physical world and remember that we are actually divine cosmic beings.
And the architect says, she stumbled upon a solution whereby 99% of all the test subjects accepted the program. And what was this solution? The illusion of choice, the Hegelian dialectic. Do you want the Republicans or do you want the Democrats? That illusion of free choice gets people to accept the program of the matrix. Do you want this form of control or do you want this form of control?
I'm telling you, it's not about me, it's about who you are. This is what all of you still don't understand. You have no idea who you are. How do I know? Because the Luciferian order built a matrix in this world. And they've programmed you from their machine, the idiot box that's on your wall. From the time you're little till this day, that's all it is. It is a mind control operation to get you to stand back and wait for Jesus to come and save you. Don't do anything. Don't exercise your power.
What if I told you you were living in a cult? A cult based on manipulation, fear, mind control, with secrets hidden in plain sight. Would you know it?
There are three major fronts used by the elite for programming monarch slaves and the general population, which are religious fronts, the national security agencies, and the military, as well as the entertainment business, including Hollywood and the music industry as a fourth. The establishment doesn't just program individuals. They program entire nations. The top men in the Monarch Programming Project were in the establishment. Yosef Mengele was the lead programmer and had already achieved the rank of Grand Master within the establishment and was a skilled Kabbalistic magician. Most of you have already begun to deprogram yourself from the world. The 5 main steps that I feel like most people go through in this deprogramming adventure. I asked some of you guys on Instagram how the deprogramming process felt like for you. To understand what I mean by deprogramming, I wanted to find what I mean by programming. What I'm talking about is the broad, unsophisticated version of programming of traditions and habitual thoughts. To get down to the core of your programming, start to examine the beliefs you were given to hold as a child. The establishment uses this to kind of hack our minds. Deprogramming is a multi-step process. So during the first step of weeding, there was probably a piece of info that broke open your programming. Deprogramming is stopping and thinking through behaviors. The only way to completely deprogram is to be cleansed by Yah and His Holy Spirit, or you break one person's programming. Yah cares. But an honest researcher or historian has to admit that there's always a connection to these people.
The red are the executives that are Jewish at these companies. The number one cause of death for black people in America is abortion. The most dangerous place for a black man today, or black baby, black woman, is in their mother's stomach. And that is a programming that's pushed through the red media. That is the red media. If you go to Apple right now, go to Apple Music. Let's load up the top 10 songs. I guarantee you they're promoting black serial killing. Absolutely. The red media is making money off of that.
We see a huge problem with an obvious enemy that is imminently threatening the lives and the futures of our country and our children, and humanity, and Christendom, and the West. And there has been decades of programming and indoctrination to target the people who otherwise would have vehemently stood against this occupation, but they know not. And so we have to make sure that they know by introducing to them irrefutable, indisputable, hardcore evidentiary fact that this threat exists, that this threat is real, that this is not a video game, that this is not a game at all, but that this is war. The goal here is to make sure that this film makes it to the masses, to the people who've been programmed and indoctrinated. That's the real goal here.
There is some kind of massive mind control program spreading across this planet. And even though you can say, well, it's because certain people control the media and they control education, and you try to explain the mind control, the deployment and the implementation of that mind control program by mundane and conventional methods, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Everyone tries. They took the long march through the institutions. They infiltrated the colleges and the universities. They own, the media companies. There is a supernatural factor behind the Jewish agenda. According to the Gnostic warning, the Jews who follow the agenda of racial supremacy and domination of the Goyim are proxies of the Archons. And so they went to Hollywood and they founded their own dynasty of movies. Okay?
Their own empire, yeah.
Their own empire. And the story of this is very well documented. It's not anti-Semitic propaganda. It's a fact.
That's right.
In fact, they're very happy to say today that they control Hollywood, and they won't let you in if you don't get their seal of approval, if you're not Jewish. So the point I'm making is that for the most part, films have fed us with a fraudulent history. And fraud and simulation are the marks of the Archons. Everything that I thought about the Holocaust came from Hollywood movies. And so the mind programming potential of this simulation technology of photography and films was a tremendous breakthrough of the Archons into the human mind.
The reason people have to comply with them is because these people own all the important resource, they own all the important land, they print the money, they own the media, they own the information, and they want to make sure that everybody agrees with them and complies with them. So they have tried very hard to damage the human psyche to the point where we are now completely empty and open for all forms of slave programming. They convince you to look at somebody and not be sure what gender they are, or to look around you and pretend you're in a pandemic when everything is fine. The slave programming, the empty mind, you'll accept any amount of garbage they want to give you, any matrix slave mind programming because you're too busy being sad to resist.
And they're coming for all of us. They're not just coming for me.
Who's all of us?
They're coming for any single person who has a degree of sovereignty about their mindset. They're coming for anyone who refuses to believe the slave programming, for anyone who wants to have a happy family and a good life, for anyone with any degree of masculine imperative, for anyone who has a degree of individualism. They're coming for all of us, and they're trying to make us all slaves.
So when you say to men, listen, you're allowed to have an opinion, you're allowed to have standards, you're allowed to have boundaries and barriers, you're allowed to get up and become important and work hard and try hard and become the kind of man who can't be controlled, then you're seen as an enemy. And especially with the massive influence I've gained, I think they look at me and go, he's helping men resist the slave programming. We don't need him around. We need to empty their brains so we can inject the slave programming and convince men to be eunuchs. Any ideology which is waking up and saying, our worldview is so extreme, the only way we can truly ensure it exists into the future is to find the most susceptible people on the planet to program and attack their minds, children. I think that's a destructive ideology and should be very closely looked at. And it doesn't matter if it's LGBTQ or anything else.
You should understand where the public school system comes from. Okay, it is shaped by Soviet ideology. I tell people a must-read book is Inside the American Education System by Thomas Sowell. It is not left or right. He is just telling you how it all came together. The decline, the deception, the dogmas, and how they are programming our children. They know how to get things in there and how to pull children away from their parents as it was designed in the Soviet system. We're being told that they're just lone shooters and then we don't really know anything else. I just feel it spiritually that these people are being programmed. So what's happening here? Well, I can tell you my suspicion. I think that this is a program because it is giving me the same ick that I had when I was looking through the period and learning the reality of what happened throughout the 1960s when MK Ultra, when that program was running. And I have no reason to believe that that program was ever discontinued.
What's happening in the schools is that the children are being programmed, teaching kids that America is a flawed country, a broken country, and that maybe they're not safe at home. And there's no future in that. The teachers are saying, what name would you like us to use when we call your parents and talk about you?
What?
In Florida, in Leon County, Florida, this happened to a mom, January Littlejohn, that her daughter was told, what sex would you like to sleep with? Behind closed doors, when you go on field trips. I mean, honestly, these private conversations happening in schools, and we have to stand up and fight. So there are court cases happening all over the United States of America right now, fighting back against this nonsense.
And I want to warn everybody with what you just said with students, is you got to really protect your kids, your grandkids, whatever you can do. There's a programming that's going on. That's really what's taking place. I was watching Victor Davis Hanson last night, and he was talking about the narrative and how powerful the narrative is, even when the narrative is a lie or an illusion, when it's all deception, when it's all fake. And Satan is the master magician.
I think the real debate should be about free will. And we feel it right now because we are being programmed. We're being programmed based on what we say we're interested in. And we are told through these discovery mechanisms what is interesting. And because people become so dependent upon it, it's actually changing and impacting the agency we have, the free agency we have.
Charles Manson would use his songs and music to influence his family as they heard over and over again the repetition of his lies. Vincent Bugliosi in his book Helter Skelter stated, quote, both Manson and Hitler programmed their followers through repetition, repeating the same phrase over and over. Here we see the death metal band Venom with the satanic pentagram and the number of the beast. Venom sings in their song Possessed, quote, I am possessed by all that is evil, the death of your God I demand, and I sit at Lord Satan's left hand. Satan is clearly using music to seduce the youth into damning their souls by programming them to take the number of the Antichrist.
Yeah, and the fact is you're being programmed for this. You've been programmed through Satan. That's why we're doing this series. It's a satanic fingerprint, and we want you to recognize it.
And we've been proving it like no other series we believe you can see because we've been showing the spiritual underpinnings.
The underpinnings that have happened from said go, when everything started changing in the sexual revolution.
We're showing it's a diabolical plan, right? Your heart just breaks. And you know what? It breaks in two ways for me. It breaks if the kids are being forced to do this. And it breaks if they're not because they've been so programmed by her to embrace this that they're just going to live a lie.
We've got to take our first break. Pastor Joe Schimmel, Good Fight Ministries. Guys, you've got to check out some of the DVDs and YouTube videos and so much information that they do in their series, Marvel and DC's War on God. We'll talk a little bit more about that, going back nearly 100 years to the 1930s. We're going back to the origins, and so much more coming up as we expose the satanic origins behind entertainment and what Hollywood puts out. They don't call it programming for nothing. The latest news from Gallup is the number of people identifying as LGBT has doubled in the last 10 years. Surprise, surprise. And those under 25 are driving the numbers. That's right. Generation Z is the most programmed, some would say brainwashed, in history. It's been over a half-century-long effort to deceive American youth, deconstruct morality, destroy family values, along with Judeo-Christian influence, groom school children, redefine truth, and train up an army of godless, rebellious young people. Now, there are a number of factors involved here, including Hollywood, the liberal media, the Antichrist education system, pushers of DEI, and wokeness.
All right, I want to close out with one more thought, and this is a tweet that I want to read to you from @RealCarrie_Smith, and I believe she calls herself Carrie Deprogrammed on X. I have found her to be a really good voice on the tactics that are being used. She wrote this: I've watched about 10 of Candace's cult episodes post-assassination. It's a fascinating window into cult indoctrination. She repeats herself constantly, repeats words and phrases she wants to stick, repeats words and phrases she wants to stick.
Through repetition, repeating the same phrase over and over.
Perceptual programming.
The globalist programmers program you. Programmed.
The programming.
Programming.
Programmed.
Programming. It's programming us.
Programmable.
Programming. Social programming. Implant programming.
Programmed programming.
The neuro-linguistic programming.
Deceived and programmed.
We're being programmed.
How we are programmed.
Programmed.
Programmed. Part of the programming.
The mind programming.
This programming.
Predictive programming.
The programming.
Programming.
Decades of programming people who've been programmed.
The mind programming, mind control program.
The slave programming.
Programming that I was under.
This is a program programming our children.
The children are being programmed.
There's a programming that's going on.
We are being programmed.
Program their followers, programming them to take the number of the Antichrist.
You're being programmed for this.
Programmed by mainstream media.
People are being programmed.
Programmed minute by minute.
Programmed by her.
Programmed. They don't call it programming for nothing.
The programmings are in everything.
The program of the Matrix.
The program of the Matrix.
Programming that creates the Matrix.
Matrix slave mind programming.
It is a massive program.
It's all a program.
And they've programmed you.
They program entire nations.
Worldwide organized program.
But once we break the programming,
Deprogramming, completely deprogram.
Carrie Deprogrammed. Deprogrammed.
Deprogramming is another way of describing the Gnostic awakening, making you focus on the lies that have been told to you by Satan and the so-called powers that be, instead of trying to get you to grieve over your own sin and focus on the lies that you've been telling yourself.
It's a satanic fingerprint, and we want you to recognize it.
It's a fascinating window into cult indoctrination.
What happens when people so-called wake up, which means wake up from the program or start to? It's removing the perceptual onion skins of programming to allow the true self in.
To spiritually come out of Mystery Babylon.